Okay, guys, I need you to pay very close attention today because I'm going to do something that almost nobody in geopolitical analysis ever does. I'm going to go back to specific predictions that Professor Jiang made before this war began. I'm going to read them out to you one by one, and then I'm going to show you, using confirmed headlines from this week, that every single one of those predictions is now coming true in real time. And this is the part that nobody is covering. I'm going to tell you the prediction that comes next. The one that Professor Jiang outlined that has not happened yet. Because if the first 5 predictions came true, exactly as he described, then what happens in the next 90 days is not speculation, it is a map. Now, before I get into this, I want you to understand something. Most people who do analysis on YouTube make predictions after events happen. They explain what just occurred. That is not analysis. That is a news summary. Real analysis makes predictions before events happen. And then you check the record. So let's check the record, okay? Prediction number 1, Professor Jiang said, and I'm using his exact framework, that America would start a war. It cannot finish, that the cost structure of this war would make it economically unsustainable. That Iran's asymmetric strategy would force America into spending vastly more than Iran on every single engagement. Here is what he said specifically: this is economic suicide. You're spending $13 million to stop a $100,000 missile. Iran is producing over 100 ballistic missiles per month. The United States and Israel combined can produce 6 to 7 interceptors per month. This is not a sustainable equation, okay? Now let's look at what happened. US and Israeli forces launched nearly 900 strikes in the opening 12 hours of this war. That was a shock and awe phase. The phase America believed would end everything quickly. The IEA confirmed that disruptions have cut global supply by about 8 million barrels a day. In response, the 32 IEA member countries plan to release roughly 400 million barrels from strategic reserves over 120 days, 172 million from the United States alone. The Sunday Guardian, in a headline that proves prediction 1 completely: the Trump administration bypassed Congress to expedite the sale of billions of dollars of weapons to the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait as Gulf allies were running low on interceptors, bypassing Congress in an emergency to resupply allies who are already running out of interceptors on day 20. Professor Jiang said this would happen. He said the math made it inevitable. And here it is, confirmed. 20 days into the war, prediction 1 confirmed. Prediction number 2, Professor Jiang said America's allies would abandon it. He said, and I want you to remember this, that the moment the cost of defending the Gulf states exceeded what any ally was willing to pay, those allies would quietly begin making their own arrangements. He described it this way: the Gulf states will start demanding security guarantees that America can't provide, or they'll start making deals with China and Russia who can actually protect them. Now let's look at what happened this week. Trump said his administration was in talks with 7 countries about helping to secure the Strait of Hormuz. He called on them to protect shipping through the vital waterway. Australia has already said it will not send naval ships. Trump told the Financial Times that NATO allies faced a very bad future if they failed to do more to support US efforts against Iran. The Sunday Guardian, 7 countries, asked Australia, already said no publicly. The others are refusing privately. And then Trump said something that tells you everything about how this is going. He said, and this is a direct quote, "I think NATO is making a very foolish mistake." Think about that. The President of the United States is publicly scolding NATO for not helping him fight a war that NATO never agreed to, never authorized, and was never consulted about. And NATO's response: silence. Complete silence. Professor Jiang said the American alliance system would fracture under the pressure of this war. 43% of voters now say they are less likely to support Republicans in 2026 because of this war. WEO News, the allies can read those numbers. They know what is coming politically in America, and they are positioning themselves accordingly. Prediction 2, confirmed. Prediction number 3. This is the one that seemed most dramatic when Professor Jiang first outlined it. The one that most people dismissed as too extreme. He said the petrodollar, the financial system that has sustained American global power for 52 years, would come under direct attack during this war. Not in theory, not eventually. During this specific conflict, he outlined exactly how it would happen. Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz. Countries desperate for oil would accept alternative financial arrangements. The yuan would be offered as a new settlement currency. And once that precedent was established, once even one major transaction cleared outside the dollar, the 52-year-old system would have its first crack. Now, let's look at what happened. The effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has disrupted approximately 20% of global oil supplies transiting through the waterway, causing Brent crude to rise from around $70 to over $110 per barrel within days. Yahoo! European natural gas prices nearly doubled after Qatar announced that 2 Iranian drones attacked Qatari gas facilities, followed by Qatar Energy halting all gas production in the country. Yahoo! Lloyd's List estimates that even with naval escorts, no more than about 10% of lost volumes could realistically be restored. The Sunday Guardian and Iran's foreign minister stated this week that after the war, Iran expects to draft a new protocol for the Strait of Hormuz, meaning Iran intends to permanently change the terms under which the world's most important oil waterway operates. This is not the petrodollar dying overnight. This is exactly what Professor Jiang described. A gradual structural undermining, a shift in who controls the terms of global energy trade. And it is happening right now, confirmed in every major financial publication in the world. Prediction 3, confirmed. Prediction number 4, Professor Jiang said the GCC economies, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, will be devastated by this war. He was specific. He said Iran's strategy was not to defeat the American military. It was to make the Gulf states so economically vulnerable that America's position in the region became indefensible. He said Iran's strategy is to make the cost of defending the Gulf states economically unbearable, to turn America's allies into liabilities. Now look at what happened to those economies. Saudi Arabia's largest refinery and Qatar's export facilities were both targeted by drone attacks. Qatar halted all gas production. The closure of airspace above the Middle East caused widespread disruption to aviation and tourism globally. Yahoo! Lebanon's economy, connected to the Gulf financial system, is operating at 50% capacity. Commercial and industrial activity has fallen 50% the capacity. Commercial and industrial activity has fallen 50%. The hospitality sector has been wiped out. Lebanon is losing approximately $20 million per day. Total losses have already exceeded $700 million. Yahoo! And this specific detail that confirms Professor Jiang's exact prediction, the UAE recalled its ambassador from Israel quietly, without announcement. That is not the action of a country that trusts its protector. That is the action of a country that is beginning to hedge, beginning to distance, beginning to look for alternatives. Professor Jiang said the Gulf states would eventually conclude that American protection was no longer reliable enough to bet their survival on. That conclusion is happening in real time. Prediction 4 confirmed. Okay, so 4 predictions confirmed, all of them made before this war began, all of them playing out exactly as described. Now, here's the part that nobody is talking about. Professor Jiang outlined a 5th prediction. And this one has not happened yet, but based on the track record of the first 4, based on the logic of the framework, it is coming. And I want to walk you through exactly what it is and when it arrives. The 5th prediction is this. Professor Jiang said that America would be forced to choose between 3 options and that none of them are good. Option 1, deploy ground troops. Option 2, accept defeat and withdraw. Option 3, attempt a negotiated exit that Iran will not accept. And he said, listen to this very carefully. There can be no ceasefire. There can be no truce. There can be no peace because both America and Iran are fighting for the nature and structure of reality itself. Now look at what Iran's foreign minister said this week. on CBS News in public to the entire world. We never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never asked even for negotiation. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes France. 24. We are not seeking a ceasefire because we do not want this scenario to be repeated again after some time. The Sunday Guardian, this is not a negotiating position. Iran is not asking for better terms. Iran is saying there will be no terms. We fight until the conditions that made this war possible no longer exist. We fight until American power in this region is permanently restructured. That is not an opening bid, that is a declaration. So now apply Professor Jiang's framework to the next 90 days. Days 1 to 30. The interceptor crisis deepens. A US F-35 has already made an emergency landing after being struck by Iranian fire. American casualties become a regular news story, not an occasional one. The political pressure in Washington intensifies. The WTO has already downgraded its 2026 global trade forecast to 1.9% from 4.6% in 2025, and warned it could fall further if energy prices remain elevated. Why in news? Every week that passes, the economic argument against continuing this war gets stronger. Days 30 to 60. This is where the critical decision point arrives. Trump faces an impossible choice. He cannot get ground troops to Congress. 43% of voters already oppose the war. We on News, he cannot negotiate. Iran explicitly refuses. He cannot claim victory. Iran is still firing, still standing, still controlling Hormuz. So watch for what Professor Jiang called victory redefinition. Watch for the language to shift. Watch for regime change to quietly become degrading capabilities. Watch for eliminating a nuclear threat to become establishing deterrence. When that language shifts, you will know Washington has privately admitted what it cannot say publicly, days 60 to 90. This is a phase Professor Jiang described as the most dangerous of all, because this is when the pressure on America to do something dramatic, to escalate in a way that changes the equation, becomes overwhelming. The UN Secretary General warned this week that the conflict is edging toward a dangerous tipping point and that the war is risking to get completely out of control. We all knew the most dangerous scenario in this window is not a ground invasion. America does not have the political will for that. The most dangerous scenario is a strike designed to change the war's trajectory, targeting something so significant that it forces Iran to the table. And the only target that qualifies, the only target that could genuinely change the cost calculation for Iran is the one that every analyst knows about and nobody wants to say out loud. I will cover that specific scenario in the next video because it deserves its own analysis and you need to understand it before it happens. Okay, let me bring this together. Professor Jiang made 5 predictions before this war began. America would start a war it cannot finish. Confirmed. America's allies would abandon it. Confirmed. The petrodollar would come under direct attack. Confirmed. The GCC economies would be devastated. Confirmed. And finally, the prediction that has not yet arrived. America will be forced into an impossible choice that ends not with victory, but with a restructuring of the entire global order. That restructuring is 90 days away from beginning its most critical phase. Here's what I want you to take away from today. The value of understanding Professor Jiang's analytical framework is not that it tells you what happened. Any news channel can tell you what happened. The value is that it tells you what is coming before it arrives. And right now, the framework is telling us that the next 90 days will determine whether the world that exists after this war looks anything like the world that existed before it. When you understand the game theory, when you understand the incentives, the geography, the cost structure, the eschatological forces that Professor Jiang outlined, you can see what is coming. And that is the most powerful thing you can have in a world that is changing this fast. If you want me to break down the escalation scenario coming in days 60 to 90, the one I mentioned but did not cover today, let me know in the comments because that analysis is ready. And based on everything we have discussed today, it may be the most important video on this channel.